Okay, so I'm going to pick up where I left off. I'm going to read Chapter 2 from my father's book, A Lonely Battle Stance, by James J. Connell Jr. Where to Go from Camp Wright. For Heinrich Thibault and about 600 other men, those horrors would not be as soon in coming, nor as intense as for the majority. The general feeling throughout the North and the South was that the war would be short-lived and their cause was the just one. With the same God on their side, both exuded confidence of rapid military victory for themselves. Therefore, many of the early volunteers only enlisted for 3 months of military service. This applied to many of the members of the Erie Regiment, including the Thibault brothers. In the beginning, there was more of a feeling in the North that their purpose was to suppress a rebel insurrection, acting more as policemen rather than going to actual war against a Confederate nation with armies of thousands at a time. Few people on either side seemed to realize or admit they were in for actual war, in which masses would suffer and die, including women and children. Northerners would slowly come to realize that it was going to take a major commitment of lives and a number of years to destroy a valiant, well-led, zealous rebel army that felt their country was being invaded, one which was willing to fight to the death to create an independent nation. Most of the Erie Regiment members eventually enlisted in the 83rd, 111th, or the 145th Pennsylvania Infantry Regiments after their 3 months obligation, or shortly afterward. These units were among the most glorified and active in almost every major engagement of the war, including the suicidal full frontal assault of Mares Heights at Fredericksburg, along with the heroic defense of the southern slope of Little Round Top at Gettysburg. The Thibaults did not join these regiments, but for those 3 months prior to the Civil War, most of which were spent in the pleasantries of what will be named Camp Wright, life was so casual in latter years of the war. Many veterans of those Pennsylvania units would look back during the midst of some perilous campaign in the wilds of Virginia and cast a longing glance back at those tranquil and happy times. At Camp Wright, the regiment was supplied with muskets. This infused new life into the men, since they could finally take target practice. At least 2 or 3 times they would get actual marching orders to prepare to go into battle. On one occasion, everything was packed up and ready for movement in the direction of the enemy, but orders were rescinded within 24 hours. Now, 2 months had passed since Heinrich and the others had first answered the call, leaving him with the feeling that they would never be called to battle. This had a negative effect on the morale and discipline for some of the men. They had come out to fight, not to play summer soldier. They began to criticize the state government and freely question its partiality. They had not been paid and never mustered in the service of the United States. It was when the soldiers' morale was lowest that something strange happened that would add a romantic and inventive turn in camp. Heinrich and some of his buddies were walking along the shore one day when they spotted a clamshell embedded beneath the crystal tide. It was glistening in all its glory of its pearly incandescence. The idea came about to fashion a ring out of the shell for a loved one at home. Using available tools including a file, jackknife, bayonet, and sandstone, a jewel was turned out the next day. The news of the great discovery spread throughout the camp from company to company and regiment to regiment with great adulation for the inventor. There was a simultaneous rush to the river in search of clamshells and other items to be transformed. For the next 3 weeks, there was a concentrated buzz of the instruments as men stole away from drill, roll call, and dress parade to go fashion rings and jewels of beauty. Men even feigned illness to find time away from guard duty, or they carried their clamshells along with them. Soon, the ring factory took priority over going off to battle and the lack of a payday. The camp became a grand bazaar for their sale and purchase, not only to other soldiers, but visiting civilians. The greater demand, the greater the manufacture. It was in this peaceful valley, during the 3 months of service, that these men came together while playing the occupation of soldier. This was of great benefit when it came to organize, drill, live, fight, and for many, to ultimately die together. It was written and said that as a regiment the Erie Boys would have fought bravely, being all active and vigorous young men who were among the very first to volunteer. But their 3 months expired, so Paymaster Veatch came around and paid the regiment for 1 month and 17 days. It was mid-July 1861, and they were discharged to their homes, with war still pending. However, the options to participate and on what level were still up to each individual. It was common knowledge throughout the military and civilian communities. A battle between the armies was within days, especially since Lincoln was pressing General George McClellan, commander of the Union, to finally attack the rebel army, which was camped across the Potomac River, and a constant threat to Washington, D.C. Of never having been called to face the foe in a single battle, Pennsylvania Private O.W. Norton wrote on July 14, 1861, "The Erie Regiment is one grand fizzle out. We left home full of fight, earnestly desiring a chance to mingle with the hosts under the Stars and Stripes. For 2 months we drilled steadily, patiently waiting the orders expected, which never came, but to be countermanded. We have now come to the conclusion that we will have no chance, and we are waiting on sullen silence and impatience for the expiration of our time." Many Erie Regiment soldiers, including Heinrich and his brother, barely reached home. When on July 21st the news of the great Union debacle at Bull Run, Manassas, Virginia, aroused the nation to a new sense of danger. This opened their eyes to the fact that they were in for a prolonged, bloody war. The American Civil War had begun. The first major engagement of the Civil War began after Union Commander Brigadier General Irwin McDowell and his equivalent Confederate counterparts, Albert Sidney Johnston and Pierre Gustave Jutant, PGT, Beauregard, took a few days to properly position their troops for battle. Both sides exuded confidence that they would emerge victorious after this one grand battle that could end the war. They felt it would be little more than a wrestling match, with bullets flying. Several U.S. congressmen, other dignitaries, and their ladies wheeled their carriages to Washington, just a few miles south of Centerville. Many brought blankets and picnic baskets, thinking it would be just another unique way to spend a Sunday afternoon. Both armies began by trying to turn the other's flank, leaving the Union at an advantage. General Thomas Jackson's rebels secured a position at the crest of the hill and held the point. Brigadier General Bernard B. rallied his own men and shouted, "There is Jackson standing like a stone wall," hence the name Stonewall Jackson. B. was immediately killed by an enemy bullet. Jackson's hard defense of the hill turned that day. The Union retreat became a bloody rout as soldiers crashed past frightened civilians who also had to scatter for their lives. In less than one day, fleeing Union troops covered as much ground as it had taken them 2.5 days to cover on the way to Bull Run. Out of 18,752 Federal infantry and artillerymen, 460 were dead, 1,124 were wounded, and 1,312 were missing. Confederate numbers are out of 18,053 infantry, cavalry, and artillerymen. 387 were dead, 1,582 were wounded, and 13 missing. Despite similar numbers, it was obviously a decisive rebel victory. and the morale booster they had hoped for. Southern states had now seceded, declared their independence from federal rule and domination, and proved they would fight to the death to maintain their freedom. For the North, Bull Run satisfied the craving for action, but disappointed their expectation of bringing the war to a quick and victorious conclusion. The defeat was dispiriting. After the initial shock had passed, soldiers seized the opportunity with stubborn determination to save the Union or die trying.